At 2, the sitter switched channels to One Life to Live, and Bech, if the pesky demands of the prize allowed him, indulged her addiction, and himself pushed the stroller to a playground. There was a sad, bare little one at Spring and Mulberry, and one even more exiguous on Mercer above Houston, beside an NYU recreation building. When feeling ambitious, he would push Golda all the way across the Bowery to the several in the long park named after Roosevelt's overprotective mother, Sarah. The ginkgos and sycamores were dully turning, and dead leaves were blossoming underfoot. Bech trussed his wriggling daughter in one of those black rubber diapers that do for swing seats now, and pushed her back and forth until the gravity-teasing wonder of it wore thin. She was still too young to dare alone the heights and swinging walkways of the plastic castle at the playground's rubber-paved center, but he entrusted her sometimes to the spiral slide, allowing her, a slippery missile in her padded playsuit, to swoop out of his hands for a swerve or two before he grabbed her at the bottom. And he let her crawl up the slide stairs, mounting upward on her own motor drives, his hands hovering inches behind her back in case she toppled when she unsteadily turned to share with him her pride of ascension. He saw a father's role, while he was here to enact it, to empower her to skirt danger more closely than either Robin or Leontine would have allowed, to introduce into her life an element of male love of risk. On the level loft floor, Golda was a muscular, unstoppable crawler, moving across toys, adult feet, stacked art books, and even the lower rungs of chairs in her tank-like progress. At night, though, when her whimper brought him to hover over her crib, her muscularity had been shed with her playsuit, and she seemed all spirit, a well of inarticulate need Bech strained to peer into, as they both strove to find the source of her unease. In the first 6 months, he would simply lift her up and take her into his soundly sleeping young mate, who would drowsily fumble a stunningly large green-veined white breast into the little mouth and stifle its discontent. But Robin, wearying of milk stains on the trim bodices of her work outfits and of this tyrannical physical tie to another's innards, had weaned Golda so that Bech, lifting the whimpering little body into his arms, had the option of changing her diaper or warming up a bottle, or both. These fumbling communions with his infant daughter at ungodly hours, while yet some traffic, gangster limousines from Little Italy, yellow cabs to and from Soho's Dance to Dawn clubs, trickled by on Crosby Street, were unlike any other of the fleeting relationships life had brought him. He was clearly, by virtue of his size, dominant, and yet tenderness and an atavistic animal protectiveness tilted the balance in favor of the helpless one. On the edge of language, she could say hi and wave bye-bye. Golda communicated with what the King James Bible called her bowels, not just the spicily fragrant movements, but the interior mysteries, the thirst or pain or bad dream or existential loneliness that had driven her soul out of sleep into the teeming world in search of consolation. He tried to provide it. Some nights, Robin awoke and with a mother's primal body and heart swamped the infant's irritation. Beside them on the bed, elderly Bech enjoyed the wash of warmth as the two young female bodies softly collided. Bech felt relieved when Robin intervened, but also cheated of perhaps his last opportunity to satisfy another, to find the biological key that turns another lock. In this case, that of an identity implausibly extended from his own, like a stick thrust into water and apparently bent. "You are my prize," he would murmur into her ear as, waiting the 60 seconds for the bottle to warm in the microwave, he held her by the window, both of them gazing down upon the yellow top of a single cab as it hurtled, rumbling over the rough cobblestones toward some dubious haven of mirrors, cocaine, strobe lights, and spastic dancing. "You are good, good, good," Bech told Golda, her appraising eyes attracted to his face by the desperate hoarseness of his whisper. "You are a truly outstanding person." They were two of a kind, irregular sleepers, stubborn crawlers. Oh, You are your daddy's girl, Leontine would coo to the child in the daytime, so Bech at his desk could hear, You have his frisky looks and his stand-up hair. Leontine, he would ask, do you think this is a terrible mistake, my having a child at my age? Babies are the gifts of God, she said, in that gently rocking voice of hers. They come when he wants them to come. The mommy and the daddy may think not yet, but he knows when a blessing do. You loves that little girl so much I can't stand some time to watch. And the mommy too you loves, but you too have your settled ways, your paths in the world. My parents the same way, my daddy come and go, 9 children they managed to make when he coming and going. I was the second youngest. My little brother come when mother 42. She used to joke she had to put on eyeglasses to be seeing him. Leontine's confident acceptance of the world as a divine cradle in which they were all rocking soothed Bech during the day, but unsettled him at night, when it appeared so clearly a delusion. In his wakefulness, he was alone on a pillar, a saint torn from the cozy quotidian. His winning the prize had unleashed a deluge of letters that battered him like hostile winds.
You would think now they could give it to some American who wasn't a kike or a coon or an immigrant who can't even speak English right?
I have been struggling to complete my novel while holding down 2 jobs to pay for my wife's prohibitive chemo treatments, plus the child care, and just 1% of the enormous amount you have so deservedly, in my opinion, won, would enable me... You have probably forgotten me, but I sat in the row behind you at PS 87 over on 77th in Amsterdam, and though you never paid me any attention, I always knew that someday you... Celebrity auction, even the tiniest personal item last year, we had remarkable good success with Mariah Carey's toenail clippings and a used paper towel from Julia Child's kitchen. Well, Hank, I guess you got them all fooled now except me. I still have your number, Jew boy, and it isn't number 1 or even 1001. Temple Emmanuel, our reading circle, can offer not even a modest honorarium, but your cab fare would be covered, and there are home-prepared refreshments beforehand. My son is going to be 2 this December, and a friendly note from you on your personal letterhead copying out a favorite passage from your own work or that of another great writer, and dated month and date and year. You seemed uneasy with Charlie Rose, but you have nothing to be ashamed of. Or do you?
I enclosed my own privately printed book, setting out in irrefutable detail the means whereby God will bring about his kingdom, first in the Middle East and then on the other continents in rapid succession. Help! A signed photograph. Help! A 1-page statement to one in need in the battle to win young minds back to reading a modest check, a quotation we could use in our promotion. No automated signatures, please. Happy to come and share with you our professional investment advice and expertise in estate planning. I try to get on top of my fury, but after 40 years of writing rings around you, and not just my own opinion, but that of most critics who aren't total schmucks, I can't internalize what seems to me a savage and pointed rejection of me. Me. I know it's absurd, dear Henry. I know life to you is and always has been just a bowl of cherries.
Envy and resentment poured toward him out of the American vastness, from every state, including Hawaii and Alaska, like a kind of lateral sleet rattling on the tin roof of his rickety privacy. He tried to utilize his insomnia by composing the lecture which Nobel laureates were obliged to give. He had received wads of information from Sweden, much of it on those long European sheets of paper impossible to fit into American folders. His speech was to be 3 days before the ceremony at the Swedish Academy. Who would attend? He couldn't imagine. Your Royal Highnesses, Mr. Lord Mayor of Stockholm, members of the Academy, distinguished guests both foreign and domestic. The Nobel Prize has become so big, so rich and famous, such a celebrity of a prize, that no one is worthy to win it, and the embarrassed winner can shelter his unworthiness behind the unworthiness of everyone else. It lifts us up, this prize, to a terrible height, a moment of global attention, and tempts one to pontificate. Looking down upon our planet, I see a growing gap between those who ride airplanes and those who do not. those who have taken wing into the cyberspace of the information age, and those who are left behind on the surface of the earth, to till the soil, fish the seas, and perform the necessary tasks that once formed the honored substance of all lives, but a few. No. What did he know of any lives but his arithmetic own, and the smattering of others he had tangled with? His point about airplanes was obsolete. He could remember when getting on a plane was an adventure for the elite, dressed in suits and cocktail dresses. The chic of it intensified by the air of danger as they bounced around among silvery Art Deco thunderheads, an air to which free champagne and duck or steak dinners served on real china added a Titanic-type elegance. But now the sort of people swarmed aboard who used to go by bus. They wore shorts and blue jeans and even what appeared to be their pajamas, a scrum of sweaty bodies taking a 1,000-mile hop as casually as the drive to the 7-Eleven. Flight was no more a miracle to them than their daily bread. They crammed their duffel bags and scuffed laptops into the overhead bins and didn't even bother to look out the windows from 6 death-defying miles up. So capitalism, our creed triumphant, was right. The masses are brought along, pulled in the millions up the ladder of prosperity generated by enterprise and technology. The telephone and radio, cinema and television, internal combustion and jet propulsion. Mankind has absorbed them as readily as Native Americans took to guns, horses, and firewater. As it happened in Ohio and the Valley of the Ruhr, so it will happen in Malaysia and Mali. Everybody rich, civilized, and discontented. No. Avoid economic geopolitics. Who could say whither the wonderful world in all its multitudinous adaptations? Strike a personal note as Owe and Heaney had done. West Side, Brooklyn, boyhood. The experience of war, GI Bill, NYU, Village in the 40s, 99th Street in the 50s, and thereafter. Books, to me, when young, were rectangular objects seen in department stores, stationery shops, and without their shiny jackets, in the public library. There, their dusty spines, decimally numbered in white ink, seemed feathers on a dark and protective wing. Their smell of dried glue mingled with the decaying, wistful smells of old men, called bums in my youth, and the homeless in these more enlightened times. What did these books mean? Who made them? Well, men in tweed jackets, smoking pipes, who lived in Connecticut, made them. And women only a shade less glamorous than movie stars, draped in chiffon, or else like Dorothy Thompson and Martha Gellhorn, dressed like men, and even like men in battle dress. No, the Swedes in the world don't want to hear of these virtually forgotten authors who once were stars in Beck's eyes. He must speak instead of the timeless bliss when pencil point touches paper and makes a mark. But isn't this atomic moment much too small to mention in so vast an auditorium of attention? In a world of suffering, of famine and massacre, wasn't aesthetic bliss obscene? And now, he must ask aloud, the printed word? The book trade, that old carcass tossed here and there by its ravenous jackals? Greedy authors, greedy agents, brainless book chains with their Vivaldi-riddled espresso bars, publishers owned by metallurgy conglomerates, operated by glacially cold bean counters in Geneva. And meanwhile, language, the human languages we all must use, no longer degraded by the barking murderous coinages of Goebbels and the numbskull doublespeak of bureaucratic communism, is becoming the mellifluous happy talk of Microsoft and Honda, corporate conspiracies that would turn the world into one big pinball game for child-brained consumers. Is the gorgeous, fork-tongued, edgy English of Shakespeare and Gerard Manley Hopkins, of Charles Dickens and Saul Bellow, becoming the binary code for a gray-suited empire directed by men walking along the streets of Manhattan and Hong Kong, jabbering into cell phones? Who is going to stop the world from evolving? Poets? Dilettantes like yours truly? Don't make me laugh, your highnesses and assorted dignitaries. As a dear old friend of mine kindly informed the American press recently, your prize is a prank. I can't do it, he told Robin.
I can't say anything important enough. The essence of what I do is that it isn't important, or at least doesn't come on as important. Importance is not important. That's what I've been trying to say all my life. Well, she said, try saying that. But that's really unimportant, he protested, and egotistical. I don't want to be egotistical. I don't want to seem to be trying to get on top of the prize, if you know what I mean. I think you're outsmarting yourself, Robin offered, primarily concerned with persuading Golda of the nutritional worth of the diced carrots the child kept picking up from her high-chair tray with curly, slimy, tiny fingers and dropping carefully on the floor. All the Swedes want is a little relaxed gratitude. You don't understand. You give a little bow when the king hands it all to you. The medal, the certificate, the week's pass on the Stockholm transit system. You say thanks at the banquet after the ceremony. The lecture comes earlier in the week. It's the lecture that's killing me. My chance at last to make a statement after 76 years of nobody listening. Well, I guess my mother listened for the first 5 years or so. A little gratitude and a half hour's intellectual entertainment. Think of them, Robin said. They've been sweating over these prizes all year, neglecting their own work and their families. Swedes have feelings, too. Look at those Ingmar Bergman movies. The women in those movies have feelings. The men don't. They're frozen. Leontine was folding little dresses and playsuits at the new washer and dryer they had installed beside the refrigerator, there in the loft's once primitive kitchen. What should I tell the people of the world? You go tell them, Leontine readily advised, that you've been wanting to make people happy ever since you've been a little boy, that the Lord be telling you what to say and you just writing it down. I don't think God plays well in Sweden, he said. God sticks pretty close to the equator. That did make Leontine laugh. He was never quite sure what would. Her shy peeling seemed to pull itself back on every note, into her supple throat, as if laughter were a sin to be retracted. Her eyes looked lacquered by merriment. Her solemn brief bangs, a straightened fringe, came less than halfway down her brow. Her 12-year-old daughter, Emerald, Bech knew from snapshots, had hair done in beaded cornrows, the maternal work of hours. He wondered if he could work God's favoring the peoples of the equator into his Nobel lecture. Perhaps he was wrong to ignore the world's lurking ethnic sores. Your Highnesses, Lord Mayor, and welcome guests. The prize is a great bauble upon the pale chest of Western civilization. But as a Jew, let me wonder aloud, what has this civilization, this Christendom, meant to my people? It has meant ghettos, pogroms, verbal and physical abuse, unappealable injustice, exclusionary laws, yellow stars, autos de fe, scapegoating whenever disaster threatened a Christian society, and a collective helplessness at the whim of every petty Christian ruler and government. One nation, to whose glory and prosperity we had contributed as artisans and merchants and moneylenders for hundreds of years, Spain, rewarded us with unconditional expulsion in the very year in which America was discovered. Germany and Austria, where Jews had seen their talents ripen into genius, wealth, and an apparent bourgeois security, those very nations instituted a systematic plan for the extermination of the Jews, a plan whose all but completely successful execution remains the astonishment of this century, the final refutation of any European claims to virtue and wisdom. Even in my own country, thought by many to be too indulgent of its Jews, swastikas are frequently spray-painted upon synagogues. In Sweden, I have read, 1 out of 3 teenagers doubt that the Holocaust ever took place. And so, Your Highnesses, I find that as a Jew, I cannot accept this sop, this pathetic attempt to paper over the smoking pit, the thousands of gas ovens in which thousands of greater gifts and purer hearts than my own. What was he doing? Turning the Nobel Prize down had made Sartre look like a fool and Pasternak like a Soviet slave. Mary Jo,
I'm panicked, he told her, over a lunch at Four Seasons he had invited her to give him. Find me a speech. Henry, an old Spielmeister like you. Tell them what you told Oprah. That was charming. I forget what I say on these damn talk shows. I try to suppress it as soon as I say it. You told her you didn't write pornography. You just tried to give the sexual component of our lives a fair shake, or something like that. The Swedes don't care if I write pornography. It's all legal there. It's part of their healthy pagan outlook. I'll never forget you on Donahue when Think Big was fresh out. I was a sophomore at Barnard, and my roommate and her boyfriend were channel surfing. You had to twist the dial in those days. And I said, "No, wait, that man is saying something." You were younger then, and your hair filled the whole top half of the screen. You were so calm and understated, not letting him bully you, and only lightly but sweetly letting the audience know you thought he was a bully. That was his job. Highly paid bully. Bully of the people, for the people. What did I say, though? Mary Jo's circular face, in which a pertly pointed chin still tried to assert itself above a set of others, like ghosts in New York television before cable came in, was flushed. Either from empathy with his plight, or from the 2 pint-sized glasses of white wine that had come with the meal, or else from the compressing effects of her leather jacket, its zipper as wide as a yardstick, and its brass studs the size of gumdrops. It wasn't what you said, it was the way you said it. You were sincere without being heavy. You were funny without being the least bit, Catskills. 6 months later, when I read in People that you and your wife had broken up, I remember, I shouldn't be telling you this, I shouldn't have had that second glass of Chardonnay. I was delighted. I thought, maybe he'll meet me. So I went into publishing, but you weren't there, or there very rarely. You were one of our invisible authors. Never mind, Henry. It's been a good life, PR. I guess I was naive. But I was only a sophomore, remember? And my guy of the time, I've forgotten everything about him except the way his fingernails were never clean, was having some potency issues. Pardon me for blushing. Mary Jo, you'll have me blushing myself. Tell me, would it help for me to see a tape of that Donahue show? Did publicity keep one? To be honest, Henry, we might have, but a ton of that stuff got tossed when we moved to the new building. Can't you just talk about the future of the written word or something? Look. This prize comes but once in a lifetime, and everybody says it was a miracle I got it. I hate to pollute the occasion with idle prattle. Oh, hon, don't badmouth prattle, she said. Her chin, the top one, firmed up and pointed at him. I have a raft of requests for you to consider. They keep coming in. We said yes, you remember, to a print interview with the Washington Post. And if you say yes to the Post, you can't say no to the Atlanta Constitution. It's a booming market down there. Ever since air conditioning, Southerners read. Then there's the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. The book's editor there has been terribly good to vellum over the years, and we're trying to do more with the Northwest. So there's this smart new arts editor at the Tacoma News-Tribune. I hate print interviews, Bech said. They take forever, they get you all relaxed and gabby, and then they crucify you, writing down whatever they please. There's no evidence of what you really said except their tape, and they keep the tape. No more print. Print is dead. Each one will come to your apartment. It will ruin Golda's nap. And take no more than an hour and a half, with some time before or after for the photographer. Only Annie Leibovitz is apt to ask you to put on makeup. Maybe with her you can get away with just a funny hat. Mary Jo, why are you doing this to me? Is it my fault you like me on Donahue? I didn't like myself on Donahue. She put her hand, still remarkably dainty, on his gnarled, hairy-backed one, as he struggled with his green fettuccine. The oiled strips eluded the tines of his fork like eels wriggling out of a trap. People want you, dear, and it's my job to facilitate access. It's not my fault they want me. I don't want them. I want peace. I want to be alone and to watch Golda grow. She can almost say words. I'm not asking for myself, or for yourself even. I'm asking for the industry. There's such a thing. You've never learned this, darling. Your mother obviously spoiled you rotten. As responsibility to others. With prizes come responsibilities. Didn't Delmore Schwartz say that? You're making me seriously think about a third glass of wine. Think about it all you want. I'm saying no to any more interviews. But you don't mean no. Her sea-green eyes must once have been lovely and big. Now they were small, in her mask of fat. Little, sinister bits of beach glass. He didn't have the heart not to be seduced by her. He grumbled by way of caving in. They won't want me once I botch this lecture. You won't botch it. You can't botch it. Faulkner wrote his on the airplane with a hangover and read it in a mumble, and now it's a document like the Gettysburg Address. Think Gettysburg Address. Henry, do you want to have some chocolate cheesecake with me, or do you want me to feel depraved all by myself? Stockholm, scattered on its Baltic archipelago, shone with the cold. The Swedish women sported blood-bright cheeks above their collars of wolf and fox as they carried their golden heads along the trendy streets, lined with restaurants and antique stores of Gamla Stan, the old town. Bech was taken to lunch at the venerable gathering spot for writers, the Kälaren den Julena Friden, with a few impish members of the Swedish Academy. It looked like a deadlock, confided one of them, a small bald twinkling of a man known for his Värmland tales in the tradition of Selma Lagerlöf, between Gunter Grass and Beidau, with Kundera the dark horse. You were in the final selection because some were afraid a stronger American might actually win, and then, you rascal, you won. The votes for you, in my view, constituted an anti-socialist protest. As you can see, we live well here, but the taxes strike some as very burdensome. Do not let Siegfried fill you with his amiable nonsense, intervened a female member of the Academy, a gracile poet and the biographer of such Nordic classics as the short-lived, tormented Erik Johan Stagnelius and the eventually mad Gustav Frörding. You are much esteemed in Scandinavia for your ruthless clarity. You rape your women as you describe them. I myself prefer to read you in French, where I think your style is even more clean and, how do you say, starkers. When your names from the basket were counted, volunteered a lyric feuilletonist of prodigious bulk and height, I was surprised but not astounded. It is as if, recently, there are others voting, ghostly presences around the table. The results are mysterious. As you may know, his first informant, his spectacles and mobile lower lip glinting, the Academy is not at our full strength of 18. There have been resignations, and yet the members cannot be replaced. Once a member, the only way out is death. Like being a member of the human race, Bech ventured, diplomatically. He was nervous. Robin and Golda were back alone in the hotel suite. They had not brought Leontine for this week of festivity and formality. Bech was afraid the cold might blast her like a jasmine blossom. He wanted her to spend more time with her husband, a security guard, who left for the night shift as she arrived home. Bech felt that he and Leontine were drawing too close in the loft, yoked together to a baby's body. He was getting to lean on her otherworldly wisdom and to think in her voice. He wanted to shut down, at this terminal point of his life, his rusted but still operative falling-in-love apparatus. As for Robin, she was not used to being with Golda all day. She missed her computers and the authority they gave her, her sight in the web. She found Sweden not for her. "Oh, it's great for you," she complained. "All you do is go out being wined and dined and interviewed and go to receptions for the fun-loving biology winners, while I'm cooped up in this so-called grand hotel with a crying kid and a lot of pompous furniture. It's too cold to go out and too hot to stay in. When I try to order room service, the people in the kitchen only speak Turkish. Inger has said they'd get us all the babysitters we want." Inger Wetterqvist was their Nobel attendant. Every winner got one. She was elegant, efficient, and in constant attendance. Her statuesque neck, with wispy flaxen tendrils in the hollows of the nape, fascinated Bech with its Viking strength. But Golda had problems with the Swedes. Whenever she saw a pale, blonde woman, she stuck the central 2 fingers of her left hand into her mouth and hid her face against her mother's thigh. When she realized on the first full day of their stay, that her parents were about to leave her alone with a golden-haired babysitter, she screamed in a panicked fury that Bech had never heard before. The child feared these tall, shining Aryans. The girl was, in her splendor, frightening. The world seemed to hold, Bech had noticed, more and more women over 6 feet in height, whole clusters of them, as if nature, no longer designing women close to the ground for purposes of childbearing and domestic labor, were launching them toward some function as yet unknown. Robin, embarrassed, told the helpless girl who, it had been arranged, would care for Golda during the official lunch at the American Embassy. Our au pair back home is black. You know, Negro? I guess she's used to her. In the end, Robin and Bech took Golda to the ambassador's lunch. It included little carrots, which the infant carefully dropped, one by one, on the floor. It was true Bech was having fun, though his lecture was still unwritten, a fact that he had tried all day to forget, and which gave him the horrors when he awoke at night, his temples aching with an excess of convivial aquavit and congratulatory champagne. To him, Sweden was a stupefying heaven. He liked the quick arc of daylight, like cold crystal, and the giant Niki de Saint-Phal sculptures at the Moderna Museet. Women, more power to them. Greta, Ingrid, from Stockholm their beauty, tinged with melancholy as beauty must be, had come forth to flood the film-struck world and a certain pastel lightness to the city under its close subarctic sky. It reminded him of Leningrad, as it had appeared to him in 1964, when he was but 41 and susceptible to the charms of a stony-faced apparatchika in a military jacket and thrilled to be breathing Tolstoyan air. Now, an old man, he saw through dimmed eyes. He had done what he could. He had tried to write his own books rather than books others wanted him to write. He had come to this northern fastness to put his pen to rest. He gave interviews to the Svenska Dagbladet, Expressen, Damernas Värld, Dagens Nyheter, Västerbottens Kuriren. The interviewer from Svenska Dagbladet asked Bech what he thought of the future of socialism. He answered that he thought it was in a down phase, but would be back as an alternative. The world was a sick man turning over and over in bed. The weak must always be protected somewhat from the strong, but not so satisfactorily that no incentive remains to become strong. Failure must have real penalties, or there will be no striving for success. Man is in the awkward position of being kinder than nature. The Svenska Dagbladet interviewer, an alert, round-headed lad with already thinning hair, asked him if these insights were to be the burden of his Nobel lecture. If they were, Bech asked, why would I be giving them away to you and your readers now? But tell me, what is a Nobel lecture about, usually? The young man thought. His eyelashes were white, which gave him, with his clever thin mouth, a delicately clownish look. Oh, the importance of writing, and how the winner came to write. Do those seem to you worth talking about? The interviewer, interviewed, shrugged. It is the custom. Sweden is a land of customs, yes? The young man, his reddish fair hair so fine that strands of it stood up straight with static electricity, smiled hesitantly. His English was not quite good enough to be certain if he was being teased. You could say so, he replied. I understand that at some point angels will break into our hotel room, yes? Singers heralding the advent of Santa Lucia, our festival of light. The interviewer was still worrying over Sweden's being a land of customs, America, perhaps, being a land devoid of customs. Our winters are long, he said, with very short days, so there is, perhaps, a Swedish need to be festive, to have festivities. We light many candles, many torches. You will see. Nobel Week is more a holiday now than Christmas. The Swedes had provided on their long pieces of paper a minute-by-minute forecast of what would happen at the ceremony. The music to be played, the order of procession, the seating on the stage amid the many academies, prize winners arrayed facing the king and queen, The braided arrangement of flowers to mark the edge of the stage, and the cylinder-shaped laurels to underscore the academic nature of the festivities, and at the great banquet afterwards, in the vast blue hall of Stockholm's red brick city hall, 1,300 guests eating from special Nobel dinnerware, Nobel servicen, while the Uppsala male choir sang and young women in blue peasant outfits danced down the broad stairs, and streams of waiters in white bore aloft torrents of softly flaming platters of dessert. But to earn his place in such grand procedures, Bech had to deliver his lecture. "My God, what am I going to do?" he asked Robin back in the hotel room. "I have to give the damn thing in 2 days, and I have no time to write it. There are all these receptions, all this champagne I have to keep drinking." "Henry, I hate to see you rattled like this. I have a female need to think of you as debonair." "Nothing I can say will be good enough. I'm unworthy. They already know that. You told me the Academy didn't mean to elect you. They were casting protest votes against each other. My informant might have been pulling my leg. They have this weird Viking sense of humor. Ho-ho, have a smash on the noggin." "Did you know," Robin asked him, "that during the war they weren't so neutral? I was reading on the internet how the Sapo, their secret police, turned over Norwegian resistance fighters to the Nazis. And a lot of Swedish Jewish businessmen got mysteriously fired. Hitler loved the Swedes. They were his idea of a real Volk." "Stop scaring me. You and Golda, you have all this racial prejudice." "She's not so dumb. Here, focus on your daughter for once." She thrust Golda into his arms. The infant's bottom felt damp. When she grinned with her scattered teeth, she drooled, another tooth coming. Her slimy little curious hand reached out and grabbed a piece of Bech's cheek and squeezed. "Ow," he said. "She's so used to being with me all day, she doesn't understand your whiskers. I'm putting on a cocktail dress and getting out for an hour. A nice young accountant in the office downstairs offered to show me the hotel computer system and then take me for a drink to some American-style Skyview place along the waterfront. He was shocked when I told him I hadn't seen anything of Stockholm. He couldn't believe I was so neglected." "Did you tell him it's mostly your choice?" "Inger offered to find us an African sitter, though it isn't easy up here. They are all these Senegalese brand-name pocketbook rip-off peddlers. She said there are some dark-skinned Turks, but I said no Muslims. Thanks." "There you go, more prejudice. Until Israel, Muslims were much better to Jews than Christians." Robin read the anxiety, the potential defeat on his face and said, "Henry, I'm young. I'm stir-crazy. I'll be back in time for you to go to the official concert at 8. Golda needs some daddy magic. You and she can write your lecture together." Members of the Academy, distinguished guests, both foreign and domestic. Bech began his lecture. "The Nobel Prize has become so big, such a celebrity among prizes, that no one is worthy to win it, and the embarrassed winner can shelter his unworthiness behind the unworthiness of everyone else." The audience was scattered on the chairs set out in the long and tawny main salon of the Swedish Academy. A room abrim with pilasters and archways, like a Renaissance fantasy, a vision by Michelangelo of human form turned into architecture. The king, tall and studious-looking, wearing glasses whose rims were of a regal thinness, was not there, nor his beautiful black-haired queen. Bech had been foolish to think of himself as speaking from the top of the world. He was speaking to an indifferent audience of pale, polite faces in an overheated space on the northern edge of Europe, a subcontinent whose natives, for a few passing centuries, had bullied and baffled the rest of the world. Among the faces he recognized few: Mary Jo Zwengler and lanky, shaggy, laid-back Jim Flaherty, his editor, grayer-headed than 20 years ago, but still ruminating on a piece of phantom gum in his mouth, had flown over from Vellum to hold his hand. Some pinstriped minions from the ambassador's staff had been delegated to attend. Robin, perched in the front row, her face a luminous pearl of warmth in the frosty jumble of alien visages. The audience as a whole had stirred in surprise when Bech, following his crisp introduction by Professor Stuvre Alien, had come to the lectern carrying a baby. But, being in the main Swedish, The audience suppressed its titters, as if this living child were an eccentricity of ethnic costume, like Wale Soyinka's African robes of a few years ago. It lifts one up, this prize. Bech continued his lecture, Golder wriggling and threatening to corkscrew in his crooked right arm, to a terrible height, a moment of global attention, and tempts one to pontificate. I could talk to you about the world, he said, as it exists in this year of 1999, waiting for the odometer to turn over into a new millennium, watching to see if Islamic militants will lock ever more of its surface into a new dark age, or if China will push the United States aside as top superpower, or Russia will spit out capitalism like a bad fig, or the gap between those who ride in airplanes and those who drive ox carts will widen to the point of revolution, or lessen to the point of Disney-fied, deep-fried homogeneity. But what, my distinguished friends, do I know of the world? My life has been spent attending to my inner weather and my immediate vicinity. In that vicinity, Golder was getting impatient. She had that solemn look which, combined with a spicy nether smell, signaled a development that would soon need tending to. Mary Jo and Robin were right. He could spiel on forever, once given a podium and a captive audience. It was something about himself he would have preferred never to have discovered. Or, Bech went on, I could talk to you about art, in the spasmodic, distracted practice of which I have spent my finest and most valuable hours. Is art, as the ancients proposed, an imitation of life, or is it, as the moderns suggest, everything that life is not? Order instead of disorder, resolution rather than inconclusiveness, peace and harmony in preference to our insatiable discontent, and, at the bottom of our souls, as Kierkegaard and Strindberg and Munch have taught us, terror, dread at being here on this planet that appears lonelier and more negligible with each new revelation from astronomy? Or is art both duplication and escape, life tweaked, as it were, into something slightly higher, brighter, other? We feel it to be so, as it is engendered at the end of a pencil point or on a computer screen. Art is somehow good, if only for the artist. Golder wriggled more strenuously, straining his venerable armature of bone and muscle. Bech studied the audience, a white sea of visages dotted here and there with a black or yellow face. To Golder's short-sighted slate-blue eyes, two shades of blue, actually, a darker ring and a paler, more skyey iris inside, the crowd must recede endlessly, out the back wall into the entire rest of the earth. I represent, Bech could not resist going on, only myself. In citizenship, I am an American, and in religion, a non-observant Jew. But when I write, I am nothing less than a member of my triumphant but troubled species, with aspirations, it may be, to speak for the primates, the vertebrates, and even the lichen as well. Life, the toast in Hebrew cries, in awe at least of the molecular amazingness of it, regardless of whatever atrocities appetitive organisms visit upon one another. I came here, ladies and gentlemen, determined not to generalize away the miracle, the quizzical quiddity of the specific, that which is the case, as Wittgenstein put it, and in honor of the majesty of my task, developed an absolute writer's block in regard to the lecture I am now audibly failing to deliver. So, Just a minute more, sweetie. Invoke the precedent of my predecessor, Nobel laureate in literature, Naguib Mahfouz, a writer, by the way, who was knifed in the throat for his efforts to describe the life of his Egypt with accuracy and equanimity, a true hero in a field, literature, rife with false heroics, and have asked my daughter to speak for me. She is 10 months old and will enjoy her first birthday in the new millennium. She belongs to the future. The topic we have worked out between us is the nature of human existence. Bech repeated in his presidential voice, the nature of human existence. He and Golda had rehearsed, but there was no telling with infants. The wiring of their minds hadn't yet gelled. If she had begun, with her loaded diaper and confining paternal arm, to scream, that would have been a statement, but an overstatement. She did not let her father down. She had her young mother's clear mind and pure nature, purged of much of the delusion and perversity whose devils had tormented the previous 2,000 years, or should one say previous 5,760 years? In the audience, wide-jawed, luminous Robin parted her lips in maternal and wifely concern, as if to intervene in a rescue. He shifted their child to his other arm, so that her little tooth-bothered mouth came close to the microphone. State-of-the-art, a filigreed bauble on an adjustable stem. She reached out with the curly, beslobbered fingers of one hand as if to pluck the fat metallic bud. He felt the warmth of her skull, an inch from his avid nose. He inhaled her scalp's powdery, soapy scent. Into the dear little crumpled configuration of her ear, he whispered, "Say hi." "Hi," Golda pronounced, with a bright distinctness instantly amplified into the depths of the beautiful infinite hall. Then she lifted her right hand, where all could see, and made the gentle clasping and unclasping motion that signifies bye-bye.